My sister wore my wedding dress to a Halloween party. Posted 47 photos. Mom commented. Stunning. Dad wrote. She pulls it off better. I said nothing. Because the truth was infinitely worse than a stained hem or a careless joke. It was a $9,500 custom heirloom gown, painstakingly stitched over 6 months using vintage French lace that I imported specifically for my spring wedding. Mary did not just wear it. She slaughtered it. To win a neighborhood costume contest, she took a pair of fabric scissors to the delicate vintage lace. She slashed it all the way up to her upper thighs to create a runaway bride costume. Then, she set up her phone on a tripod in my parents' kitchen, started a live stream, and poured a bottle of cheap, sugary red wine directly over the hand-sewn silk bodice. I walked straight through my parents' front door and through the soaked, ruined, wine-stained silk directly onto their pristine glass coffee table. The heavy fabric landed with a wet thud, splattering crimson droplets across the white rug. Mary just smirked. She was lounging on the sofa, still wearing her dramatic stage makeup, holding up her phone with the camera lens pointed squarely at my face. She was still recording. I stepped forward and reached for the device. I wanted the broadcast to end. Mary lunged upward and shoved me. She planted both hands against my chest and thrust all her weight forward. My shoulder slammed violently into the heavy oak doorframe. A sharp, sickening crack echoed in my own ear. Fire shot immediately down my arm, followed by a wave of nausea that dropped me to my knees. My father stood 10 feet away by the kitchen island. He watched my head bounce against the wood. He watched me hit the floor. He paused for exactly 1 second, entirely motionless, assessing the scene. Then he turned his back, opened the stainless steel refrigerator, and grabbed a beer. My mother stepped right over the ruined wedding dress, pointed her manicured finger down at my face, and started screaming. She yelled that my dramatic, childish scene was ruining their peaceful Sunday afternoon. She told me I was acting completely unhinged over a piece of fabric. I pushed myself off the hardwood floor. The pain in my shoulder was blinding, making my vision swim with dark spots. But my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I stared at my father's broad back as he popped the cap off his bottle. I looked at my mother's sneering, flushed face. I looked at my sister, who was busy checking the comments on her live stream. The very last invisible string tying me to this family simply snapped. I turned around, walked out the front door, and drove away. I sat at my kitchen island 2 hours later, pressing a heavy bag of frozen peas against my throbbing collarbone. The cold plastic bit into my skin, numbing the sharp, radiating ache. I am 32 years old, and for the last 10 years, I have built an incredibly demanding career as a luxury event coordinator. I organize million-dollar corporate galas. I negotiate with cutthroat catering vendors, wrangle massive high society egos, and manage the impossible, irrational demands of the wealthiest families in the state. My entire professional life is built on anticipating disaster and neutralizing hostile personalities. I know exactly how to handle arrogant, irrational people. I simply never applied those corporate rules to my own blood. The condensation from the frozen vegetables dripped down my wrist, mimicking the exact sensation of the expensive toner Mary stole from my vanity last Christmas. I remembered confronting her that morning, holding the empty glass bottle of serum that cost me $200. My mother just scoffed from the living room couch. She called me petty and calculating. She told me it was just a bottle of liquid, that Mary was my younger sister, and her using my things would never kill me. She accused me of acting like a rabid dog over skincare, intentionally trying to start a war on a holiday. My father had just stared at the television, pressing the remote to turn the volume up on his baseball game, completely ignoring my existence. They taught me early on that my boundaries were jokes. Sitting in my quiet kitchen, wiping the cold water off my skin, my pulse slowed to a steady, calm rhythm. They thought they had broken me into permanent submission. They thought my silence meant I was weak. They never realized they were just teaching me to stop playing by their rigged family rules and start playing by corporate ones. Mary always used clothing as a psychological weapon. 6 months ago at our engagement party, the dress code was formal and muted. Mary walked in wearing a skin-tight white gown with massive cutouts. She spent the first hour parading in front of the photographers. Right before the toasts, she walked past my table and deliberately slammed her hip into mine. A full glass of Merlot soaked into my ivory silk blouse. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of vodka and peppermint. She whispered that I looked far too pathetic for Nolan's family anyway, and she was doing me a massive favor by giving them something else to look at. The glass shattered across the floor. I raised my voice, demanding she get out. My mother immediately materialized, grabbed my wrist, and dragged me into the hallway. She hissed through clenched teeth, asking if I was actively trying to embarrass our family in front of the Carters. She ordered me to wash my face, cover the stain, and stop acting like a bitter old maid. She warned me that Nolan would absolutely leave me if I continued acting crazy in public. Nolan stepped into the hallway right behind her. He comes from old money, a status my parents worship. Nolan kept his voice completely level. He wrapped his arm around my waist, looked my mother dead in the eye, and told her we were leaving our own party. Her face flushed scarlet. On the drive home, Nolan held my hand in the dark cab. He told me the toxicity was going to completely destroy my spirit if I let it continue. He was right. I spent my entire life absorbing their cruelty to protect their fragile public image. I threw the melting bag of peas into the sink, picked up my phone, and opened the contact list I strictly save for high-stakes corporate disasters. Sunday morning, my phone buzzed. A text message from my mother illuminated the screen. She wrote that I had completely ruined the weekend with my outburst. She stated my father was furious with my disrespect. She demanded I call my sister and apologize for my childish tantrum immediately. I swiped the message away and opened Instagram. Mary had uploaded a fresh carousel of photos from the Halloween party. High-resolution close-ups of the shredded vintage lace and the cheap red wine dripping down the silk bodice. Her caption read, "Some people have absolutely zero sense of humor. Stay wild and never apologize." Hundreds of likes poured in. Comments from her friends praised her bold creativity and told her to ignore the haters. I locked the screen. The ache in my bruised shoulder radiated down my collarbone. I walked into my home office and opened my laptop. Years working in luxury events taught me one undeniable truth about people like Mary. They run purely on ego and the absolute need for public validation. You never have to outscream a narcissist. You just have to build them a massive stage, hand them a shiny microphone, and wait for them to hang themselves with their own vanity. I called a close colleague who owed me a massive professional favor. We spent 20 minutes crafting a highly official, impeccably branded email from a fake, avant-garde Gothic fashion label. The email landed straight in Mary's inbox. It praised her subversive, daring design, calling her destruction of the wedding dress a brilliant, bold statement. Then came the hook. The fake brand offered to buy the exclusive commercial rights to her photos for an immediate payout of $5,000. Knowing my sister, the bait was intoxicating. She craved public validation, but she worshipped fast cash even more. 2 hours later, my colleague sent me a screenshot of Mary's newest Instagram story. She posted a blurred image of our fake email header with a smug caption, writing about her creative genius finally getting recognized by the industry, promising big things were coming soon. Corporate money always comes with a catch. To authorize the $5,000 transfer, their accounting department required a signed liability waiver. The crucial clause sat right in the middle I. Mary Evans acted alone and with full intent when I used scissors and chemicals to permanently alter and destroy the dress valued at $9,500. She wanted the spotlight so badly she went blind. She wanted the money so desperately she skipped the fine print. At 4 in the afternoon, a new email hit my inbox with a PDF attached. Her digital signature rested perfectly on the dotted line. It was a flawless, legally binding confession to a felony. I forwarded the document to my litigator, put on a sharp black blazer, and drove directly to my parents' gated community. The cheerful chatter of 50 wealthy neighbors died the second my heels clicked against the patio stones. My parents' Sunday barbecue was in full swing. Aunt Carol stood near the buffet laughing with the HOA president, while my father held court by the grill, playing the successful patriarch. I walked right past the catered buffet. Nolan flanked my right, a solid wall of calm. My litigator walked on my left. My mother immediately broke away from her friends and marched forward. She pointed a manicured finger at my chest, demanding I leave before I ruined their aesthetic. She hissed that I was making a fool of myself over a stupid piece of fabric. I kept my hands relaxed. My lawyer stepped past me and dropped a thick manila folder onto the center of the glass patio table. The heavy thud made the surrounding guests flinch. He didn't yell. He simply announced to the silent crowd that a formal criminal complaint had been filed against Mary Evans. The charge: felony destruction of property exceeding $9,500. Mary let out a high, mocking laugh. She crossed her arms, sneering at the neighbors, calling me a bitter, dramatic loser who couldn't take a joke. My lawyer opened the folder. He pulled out the liability waiver and read her written confession out loud so the entire yard could hear it. He then informed her the Gothic fashion brand didn't actually exist. The smugness vanished from Mary's face instantly. Her jaw dropped. A bead of sweat rolled down her pale cheek as her chest rose in rapid, shallow jerks. Raw terror finally replaced her lifelong entitlement. My mother lunged across the table. She grabbed the printed contract, ripped it into jagged pieces, and threw them onto the grass. She spun around, her face contorted with rage. She screamed that I was a jealous, psychotic liar. She shouted that I was a malicious bitch framing my sister with forged documents, begging the crowd to ignore my mental breakdown because Mary was an innocent girl. I stepped closer to her. I looked down at the torn shreds of paper, then back into her frantic eyes. I told her she could rip up 1,000 copies, but the original digital file was already sitting on a detective's desk. My mother opened her mouth to scream again, but no sound came out. I ignored her and turned to my father. He stood totally frozen by the grill, his knuckles bone white. I told him the police report was just a formality. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I told him that 20 minutes ago. I hit send on a mass email containing the security footage of Mary violently shoving me, alongside her signed felony confession. I sent it directly to the HOA president and every member of his country club's disciplinary committee. The grill tong slipped from his hand, clattering against the stone pavers. His jaw went completely slack. The carefully constructed mask of the respected businessman dissolved instantly, leaving behind a terrified old man darting his eyes toward his golf partners. They were already setting their plates down. Aunt Carol quietly backed away toward the gate, pretending she didn't know us. The whispers started among the crowd, sharp and disgusted. Mary collapsed onto the patio stones. She grabbed the hem of my blazer, sobbing with mascara running down her cheeks, begging me to cancel the report. She swore she would find the money, pleading with me not to ruin her life. I looked down at her shaking hands. I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt. I told her she ruined her own life, and I was just delivering the final bill. Nolan placed a hand on the small of my back. He didn't say a word. He just guided me toward the driveway. I walked away, leaving them in the smoking wreckage of their own making, surrounded by an audience that would never look at them the same way again. The justice system moves at a glacial pace. It took 7 weeks for the precinct to process the complaint and issue the formal indictment against my sister. But high society circles operate at lightning speed. By Monday morning, my father's pristine reputation was reduced to ashes. The country club's disciplinary committee held an emergency vote. Stephen Evans was quietly asked to resign to avoid a public expulsion. The partners at his golf club stopped answering his calls, and his corporate contracts dried up overnight. Nobody wanted their brand associated with a man who actively covered up the assault of his daughter. My mother became a ghost in her own neighborhood. The women she used to host for mimosas now crossed the street when they saw her. She spent her days trapped inside her silent house, completely isolated from the elite world she worshipped. Mary faced a judge in November. With a signed confession and video evidence, she pleaded guilty to felony property destruction. To keep their golden child out of prison, my parents drained their retirement accounts. They paid the $9,500 in restitution, plus thousands more in legal fees. Mary avoided jail, but the judge slapped her with strict probation, 400 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record. She lost her job and moved back into my parents' guest room. They were finally forced to live exclusively with the monster they created, trapped in a financial and social prison of their own design. A year later, the warm Mediterranean breeze rolled off the Amalfi coast. Nolan stood at the end of a stone terrace overlooking the water. We kept the wedding guest list to exactly 40 people, chosen family and close friends who celebrated our peace instead of demanding our suffering. I wore a brand new silk gown. My phone sat silent in a drawer, all of their numbers permanently blocked. I walked down the aisle, breathing in the cleanest air of my life. The final gavel strike had echoed through the courtroom 8 months before my wedding. The court ordered immediate restitution of $9,500, plus a mandatory state penalty of $2,500. My parents liquidated their remaining stock portfolios to cover the check. The social execution was even more absolute. The HOA board voted unanimously to fine them $500 a day until they removed the security cameras they'd installed in a paranoid frenzy. The country club board sent a 2-sentence letter terminating my father's membership immediately. They lost their money. Their golden child lost her future. And they lost the only thing they ever truly cared about: their pristine public image. 8 months after the gavel fell, a wrinkled envelope appeared in my mailbox with no return address, just my mother's frantic handwriting. I stood at my kitchen counter and tore it open. She wrote 3 full pages of pure manipulation, claiming my father was having chest pains from the stress and Mary was deeply depressed. The final line was a desperate, hollow echo. She wrote that she was still my mother, that family always forgives, and that I needed to come home and fix the mess I created. I stared at the ink on the page. My heart rate didn't spike. I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. I walked over to the paper shredder, fed the pages into the metal teeth, and listened to the satisfying hum of the blades destroying her words forever. That evening, I sat at a massive dining table surrounded by 30 incredible people. Nolan sat beside me, pouring wine. His mother sat across from us, laughing at a joke my best friend just told. This was my chosen family. People who celebrated healthy boundaries instead of punishing them. Nobody spilled drinks on purpose. Nobody threw veiled insults. For the first time in my life, my shoulders dropped completely. I finally understood the difference between a house held together by toxic obligation and a home built on genuine respect. Let's break down the anatomy of a parasitic family unit. The hard truth is, People who constantly demand your forgiveness don't actually value peace. They just want permission to keep hurting you without facing the consequences. They rely entirely on your silence as their primary currency. Look at my father, the ultimate bystander. Society often focuses its anger on the loudest abuser in the room, but the quiet coward in the corner is infinitely more destructive. An abuser acts out of ego or rage, but the bystander acts out of pure convenience. When my father watched me slam into a doorframe and walked away to grab a beer, he cast a silent vote. He told the abuser her violence was approved, and told the victim her physical safety was worthless compared to his Sunday comfort. Bystanders like him build the stage that abusers dance on. Look at my mother, the enabler. Gaslighting isn't just an internet buzzword, it's a deliberate narcissistic defense mechanism designed to crush your reality. When a toxic mother calls you dramatic for defending your stolen property, she is holding up a shield. If she admits you are a true victim, she has to face her own colossal failure as a parent. It is always easier for a weak parent to demonize the reliable scapegoat than to discipline the golden child. They will rewrite history and paint you as the villain simply to avoid the weight of their own guilt. Surviving a dynamic like this requires throwing away everything they ever taught you and writing a new set of laws for your life. Rule number 1. The ego is the ultimate weapon. You never have to outscream a narcissist. You just have to offer them a mirror and let them hang themselves with their own vanity. Mary's downfall wasn't caused by my anger. It was caused by her own desperate need for public validation. Rule number 2. Forgiveness without consequences is just permission to abuse you again. We are conditioned to always be the bigger person, to keep the peace at all costs. But keeping the peace for an abuser means going to war with yourself. True peace requires enforcing absolute consequences. If someone breaks your belongings and demands a smile, hand them an itemized invoice. Rule number 3. The family title is a lease, not a deed. Blood does not grant someone a lifelong pass to disrespect you. Sharing DNA does not mean you owe them your silence, your money, or your sanity. If they burn down your house, you do not owe them the warmth of the fire. You walk away, lock the gates, and let them sit in the cold ashes of their own making. Look closely at your own life. Who is currently standing in your living room, breaking your things, while looking you dead in the eye and telling you that you are the one who is hard to love? And more importantly, how much longer are you going to let them? Tell me your story in the comments below. It is time to stop paying the price for their silence. I am Vanessa Carter, and I am finally free.